It is said that somewhere beyond the lands where maps grow uncertain, where the roads blur into reeds and the wind forgets its own direction, there lies a river that does not flow as other waters do. It moves as though remembering, as though carrying, in each trembling ripple, a memory too heavy for silence, yet too sacred for speech. Tonight, in the soft hush of twilight, we begin here, where the first thin strand of mist rises like a pale veil, drawn slowly from the river's dreaming surface, where the last gold of the sun slips behind distant hills, leaving the world gently washed in dust-blue breath, where reeds stir with the unhurried sway of ancient scribes, writing and rewriting stories in the dimming air. And somewhere within this stillness, the listener hears it. A question carried by the current, subtle as an exhale beneath the earth. What kingdom once rested beneath these quiet waters? The river glimmers faintly, as if waiting, as if expecting you to follow its murmured invitation toward the forgotten place where history thins, where names grow transparent, and where an old crown sleeps beneath the folds of time. So you move closer. The twilight deepens. The ceremony begins. Whispers tell us that in an age neither distant nor near, an age lost not by years but by intention, a realm once flourished along this river's patient spine, a kingdom built not for conquest, nor for glittering ceremony, but for quiet communion with the world's hidden harmony. Its people carved their stories not into marble, nor onto flags that claim dominion, but into stone tablets laid softly beside the river's edge. Trusting water, the oldest keeper of secrets. Some believe the kingdom's name was spoken in a tongue shaped from wind and birdsong, a language now carried only by the drifting reeds. Others say its name was never written at all, for the people understood that what is sacred does not need to be claimed. Yet all versions agree on one thing. The crown of this kingdom was unlike any other. Forged not from metals wrestled from mountains, but from river stones smoothed by centuries, marked by the moon and set with a single spiral emblem that seemed to echo the slow turning of the heavens. It is said the crown did not symbolize rule over land or body, but guardianship over memory itself. And perhaps that is why, on a night no chronicle dared to record, the river chose to keep it. Beneath the silence, deeper mists wander between the reeds, as though searching for the story's next breath. You follow, drifting along the riverbank where shadows stretch like long-forgotten prayers. Water laps the shore with a rhythm ancient as heartbeat, and somewhere far ahead, you sense something submerged, waiting to speak. Travelers of old described this place as a threshold. Neither river nor land, neither past nor present, but a drifting seam where memory becomes fluid. They spoke of stones rising under the surface, like the tips of drowned temples, their edges softened by centuries of gentle sleep. Some swore that on certain nights, when moonlight shimmered like silver smoke, you could glimpse carved symbols glowing faintly from below. An echo of a lineage no chronicle preserved. An echo of a kingdom that chose to vanish. Scholars who later wandered through these regions argued the kingdom was swept away by sudden flood. They imagined storms, swollen rains, walls of water descending with merciless force. But the river disagrees. Its tone is too tender, its depths too calm, its breath too knowing to have played the part of destroyer. Instead, the river behaves like a host, a keeper of a chosen slumber. And so the legends tell of a final night, a night neither mourned nor resisted. When the moon ascended in full radiance, turning the waters into sheets of molten silver. On this night, the people did not flee. They did not cry out. Instead, a quiet procession walked toward the river carrying torches whose flames bent reverently toward the water, as though greeting an old friend. Some believe they entered the water willingly, answering a sacred summons. Others say they were returning to the place from which their ancestors first emerged. A few whisper that the kingdom had grown weary of the world's harshness and chose instead to fade gently into the arms of the river, trusting that true stories never die. They simply transform. Still others claim the procession was not made of people at all, but spirits wearing human shape, finally returning to their source after centuries spent guiding the living. Which version is true? The river never says. Its answer is merely the soft swirl of silver beneath moonlight, the kind of silence that feels more like a lullaby than an absence. As you wander deeper into its murmured memory, the landscape shifts. Trees lean closer, their trunks twisted like ancient scrolls. Fireflies glimmer with the gold of forgotten lanterns. And beyond the veil of mist, the faint silhouette of a submerged archway becomes visible. A doorway, swallowed yet not erased. The carved stones are worn smooth by time, but you can still discern faint spirals etched into their faces, symbols that mirror the crown's emblem. These spirals seem to turn slowly in the mind, drawing your thoughts inward, downward, toward the river's dreaming heart. Perhaps it was here that the last ceremony was held. Perhaps it was here that the crown sank quietly into the depths, carried by hands unseen. In some stories, the crown continues to drift just beneath the surface, circling endlessly, never rising, never descending, suspended between worlds. In others, it glows softly in the river's darkest chamber, a distant pulse of memory. The monks of the mountain monasteries, who come to this river once each decade, claim that the water remembers not events but emotions. They say the river holds a soft sorrow, a gentle longing, and an unending patience. As though waiting for someone to ask the right question. As though waiting for someone to listen not with the ears, but with the soul. Where memory fades, the monks whisper, truth wears a veil, but does not vanish. And so, as night settles fully, you find yourself standing once more at the river's quiet edge. The mist thickens around your ankles, cool as ancient breath. Stars shimmer faintly above, like forgotten inscriptions returning to the sky. The river sighs, a long, low exhalation that seems to echo from centuries far beneath your feet. It carries neither confirmation nor denial, no revelation, no final answer, only the soft assurance that some realms are not meant to be claimed by history's pages. Some stories prefer to be held in water, fluid, shifting, unbound. Some crowns are remembered not by kings, but by rivers. You stand there a moment longer, feeling the edges of the world grow gentle. The night deepens its hush. Your breath slows. The river gleams softly in moonlight, its surface smoothed into silver calm. Perhaps the kingdom chose to vanish. Perhaps it was never lost at all. Perhaps its memory is carried in every droplet that touches the shore. A realm preserved not in stone, but in silence. And as the river's quiet murmur drifts into your thoughts, shaping the edges of sleep, You sense that the story is still unfolding somewhere beneath the surface. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The river remembers. The river waits. And tonight, for just a breath, it has let you near its dreaming, at the curve of a quiet river, where the water drifts like a long, unbroken breath. There stands a solitary willow. It leans ever so slightly toward the flowing mirror below, as though listening for a name it once knew. Its branches, thin and fluid, fall like veils of emerald silk, trembling with every whisper of the night. In the soft blue hush, between dusk and moonrise, the willow looks almost otherworldly. A sentinel made not of bark and leaf, but of remembrance. It is said that beneath its sweeping roots lies a gate, a carved archway swallowed by centuries of soil, hidden beneath the earth as though the world itself wished to cradle it in secrecy. Old wanderers, passing along this river bend in the early hours before dawn, have spoken of a faint tremor beneath their feet. A pulse, gentle and steady, like the slow heartbeat of something ancient lying asleep. Tonight, under a sky cooled by drifting clouds, we begin our journey here. Beside this quiet guardian, no lantern is needed. The moon, low and pale, scatters its muted glow across the river's surface, guiding us with shimmering threads of silver. Every step toward the willow feels like approaching a threshold woven from silence. This place does not call loudly. It does not demand. Instead, it invites softly, patiently, as though it has been waiting for someone willing to listen. Some believe the gate beneath the willow was once the final passage into a lost kingdom, a place whispered about in old, half-remembered tales, where the people could read the river as though it were a vast unfolding scroll. They claim that currents carried messages from unseen realms, and that the slightest shift in the water's breath was a warning, a blessing, or a prophecy. And so, as we draw near the willow's cascading curtain of leaves, we step not only toward a tree, but toward the thin edge between worlds, the waking one, and the one held beneath it. The ground here feels softer, rich with the memory of falling leaves and years of quiet rainfall. With each step, the earth gives slightly, like an old friend adjusting itself to welcome a familiar presence. Some wanderers from centuries past told of a feeling that overcame them when they reached this bend in the river. A gentle pull, as if the earth remembered their footsteps from another lifetime and wished to guide them home. Others, in moments of solitude, described hearing faint murmurs rising from the soil. Not voices exactly, but something similar. A resonance. The echo of a whisper spoken so long ago that only the shape of it remains. As you pause beneath the willow, its branches sway in a slow, deliberate motion, stirred by a breeze that seems to come from nowhere. The leaves brush against one another, with a sound like distant rain falling on hollow stone. Beneath this canopy, the world feels dimmed, softened. Even the river's murmur seems quieter here, as though it, too, honors the hush. Close to the trunk, the willow's roots twist like frozen waves, embracing the earth with a tangle that appears almost sculpted. Deep within that spiral of roots, legends say, rests the hidden archway, the silent mouth of the buried gate. Long before the willow grew here, long before the river changed its path and bent around this very place, there existed a kingdom so attuned to the rhythms of nature that stone and spirit, breath and water were said to converse freely. Carvings left on scattered stones depict a people who traced the rivers like others trace constellations. They saw in every ripple a meaning, in every shifting depth a message. Some fragments show figures standing by the water, their heads bowed as though listening. Behind them rise symbols carved in spirals, arcs, and flowing lines, shapes that resemble both waves and words. Scholars have tried to decipher these engravings, yet each time meaning seemed within reach. It dissolved like mist at sunrise. Perhaps the carvings were never meant to be understood through intellect alone, but through a kind of quiet attunement, a surrender to stillness. And so, the willow, rooted above a kingdom lost to time, became something of a guardian, a keeper of a threshold, forgotten by most, remembered by only a few. Its branches, with their cascading grace, form a natural veil, a curtain between the seen and the unseen. As we linger beneath it, the night grows deeper. The sky shifts into a deeper shade of indigo, and the first faint shimmer of stars peers through the drifting clouds. Their reflections waver in the river below, as though ancient lights rise from the depths rather than fall from the heavens. You kneel beside the tree, brushing your fingers lightly against the roots. The earth feels cool, but beneath that coolness, there is a sense of warmth, a hum, almost imperceptible, like breath lying dormant. This is the place where, according to old law, pilgrims once knelt too. They would close their eyes, rest their hands upon the soil, and imagine walking through the hidden archway into chambers carved with symbols of moons, tides, and drifting petals. Whispers tell us that beyond the sealed gate lies the last hall of that forgotten kingdom, a place preserved not by stone alone, but by intention. The chambers are said to be filled with the scent of ancient incense, lingering like a faint memory suspended in the air. Some say the smoke never fully dissipated, caught in an eternal stillness where no wind has touched for ages. Inside those unseen chambers, relics may rest. Bowls carved from river stone, scrolls sealed with wax, the color of setting suns, and statues shaped from clay infused with ash from long extinguished ceremonial fires. None who have claimed to sense the gate's presence speak of fear. Instead, they speak of solemnity, of reverence, of feeling as though something sacred lies within, waiting quietly, asking nothing but silence in return. Perhaps this is why the gate remains buried. Perhaps the world above is too restless, too hurried, too eager to uncover rather than to understand. The willow's roots wrap around the hidden archway, not as chains, but as arms, protecting what must stay asleep until the earth itself decides otherwise. You rest your back against the trunk, feeling its age, its steady strength. Overhead, the branches sway again, slow and soft, as if responding to a lullaby sung by the wind. There is a rhythm in their movement, one that aligns with the heartbeat of the night, with the slow curl of mist rising from the river's edge. For a moment, you close your eyes, and in that moment, an image drifts through your mind. Not sharp, not clear, but gentle, like a half-remembered dream. You glimpse an archway carved with spirals and symbols, its surface worn smooth by the passage of uncounted years. A faint glow leaks through the cracks of its sealed stone, neither warm nor cold, but soft and steady, like the glow of moons reflected in still water. You see halls stretching into darkness, lined with relics, placed not for worship, but for remembrance. You sense the presence of those who once walked there, not as ghosts lingering behind, but as echoes carried forward through time. Then the vision fades, dissolving the way breath fades on a window pane. The willow rustles again, gentle as a sigh. It is impossible to know whether it warns or blesses, whether it urges you to stay or to turn away. But perhaps its message is not meant to be known. Perhaps it is meant only to be felt, the way distant thunder is felt long before it is heard. The river drifts on, unhurried. The sky deepens. The willow's silhouette grows darker, blending with the night until it seems almost a part of it. Some truths, the old tales remind us, keep themselves hidden, not out of malice, but out of mercy. Some gates stay sealed so their silence may remain unbroken. Some memories lie beneath the earth, because the world above is not ready to receive them. As you rise slowly, stepping away from the tree's sweeping curtain of leaves, you feel the night holding you gently, like a cloak of cool air. The river glimmers beside you, carrying its ancient murmurs downstream, where other bends, other mysteries await. You look back once more at the willow, now a dark figure draped in shadows. Its branches sway in a final whisper, soft enough to be mistaken for a dream. Perhaps the gate beneath its roots does exist. Perhaps it leads to chambers no living eye has seen for centuries. Perhaps the kingdom lost to time still breathes in a chamber of endless dusk. Or perhaps the gate opens only in the heart. When the world grows quiet enough, when the night becomes deep enough, when the mind sinks gently towards its sleep. Few truths are certain here. But as you walk away, the willow's silhouette lingers in your memory like a final echo. Silent, sacred, waiting. And in that lingering silence, the night softly reminds you. Some doors open only in dreams. Some stories reveal themselves only in stillness. And some kingdoms, hidden beneath the willow's shadow, remain at peace by staying unseen. It begins with a sound so small, so subtle, that one might mistake it for the echo of a distant memory. A single drop of water falling through cold air, striking an unseen stone far below. Then another, and another, each one patient, measured, unhurried. It is said that in certain forgotten corners of the world, water remembers what people choose to forget. And beneath a river whose name has been lost to silt and reed, there lies a chamber where that remembering never ceased. Tonight, we walk there together. Slowly, carefully, as though entering a dream that has waited too long to be acknowledged. Beneath a pale crescent moon, the river's surface shivers with a quiet silver light. Lanterns tremble in the hands of those who have returned to guide us, their flames reflecting in the dark water like drifting stars. Some believe the entrance appears only when the river is calm enough to mirror the heavens. Others say it is always there, but only visible to those who approach in silence. And so we begin with silence. A wooden boat slides across the glass-like water, guided not by oars but by the current itself, as though the river has already accepted our arrival. Reeds lean inward as we pass, brushing against the hull in soft whispers. Somewhere beneath, hidden ridges and carved stone wait like sleeping guardians. Then, as the lantern light stretches across the surface, a shadow appears. A darker stillness beneath the water. A doorway, a descent, an invitation. We slip from the boat and follow the curve of a staircase cut long ago into the riverbed. The steps are worn smooth, moss brushed thin by centuries of currents. Lanterns flicker against the stone walls, revealing lines carved in spirals, waves, and lunar arcs. The deeper we go, the cooler the air becomes, dense with the scent of wet earth and ancient limestone. It feels as though we are walking not into a place, but into the memory of a place. And beneath the silence, we can still hear the river breathing above. Some believe that this chamber was carved during the final years of a quiet dynasty, one whose rulers preferred contemplation to conquest. They built sanctuaries instead of fortresses, altars instead of thrones. And of all their sacred rooms, this was the last, the one meant to hold the kingdom's final truths. Fishermen speak of it in low tones. Wandering monks bow slightly when its name is whispered. No map shows its location, though some old charts display a faint stain on the parchment, as though an inked symbol once existed, but chose to fade away. The staircase ends in a pool of still water, so black and calm that it seems to swallow the lantern light. We wade into it slowly, the chill rising around our ankles, then our knees, then our waists. The chamber opens before us like a submerged cathedral. Pillars rise from the water, their tops shrouded in shadow. The air hums with the low, constant echo of dripping water, steady as a heartbeat. Here, every sound feels sacred. Lanterns cast golden rings on the surface, and as they sway, the carvings along the pillars shimmer as though alive. They tell pieces of a story, though never in complete form. The rise of a people who lived by the river's rhythms, who understood the moon as a companion and the tides as scripture. Their nights were filled with rituals whispered under torchlight, with festivals held on the riverbanks where songs drifted like smoke into the branches of overhanging trees. Some believe the people carved their first promise to the river onto these very stones. We will listen. And perhaps that is what created the bond that still lingers in this chamber, humming softly in the darkness. We move deeper, water curling around the edges of submerged relics. A broken urn, a tilted slab etched with symbols blurred by the passing centuries, a crescent-shaped stone offering, resting exactly where the moonlight from above might once have touched it. As the lanterns glide across the chamber's surface, we notice faint patterns on the walls. Spirals carved in continuous lines, uninterrupted, like the river's eternal path. Flowing marks that resemble currents frozen mid-motion. And everywhere, the delicate arc of the crescent moon, a symbol that appears again and again, as though it was the kingdom's own quiet heartbeat. Whispers tell us these symbols formed a kind of celestial map, not of stars in the sky, but of moments in time. The festivals at dusk, the nights when the river swelled with prophetic dreams, the days when the current slowed as though listening. It is said that on certain nights, the chamber glowed with reflected moonlight so pure, it felt almost like snowfall beneath the water. Monks wrote of nights when the surface shimmered with shapes, as if the river itself was trying to speak. But as the kingdom faded, the light grew dim, and eventually, only echoes remained. We drift toward the heart of the chamber, guided by a slope in the stone floor. The water grows shallower here, revealing the faint outline of a circular dais beneath the surface. A platform where rituals once unfolded. Lantern light dances across it, revealing grooves shaped like the petals of a lotus, their edges worn smooth by countless hands. Perhaps prayers were whispered here, Perhaps memories were surrendered here. Or perhaps this was simply a place where people came to listen to the river breathe. We pause, feeling the air thicken with time. The chamber's silence is not empty. It is full, heavy, woven with the weight of everything this place once meant. Some believe the chamber's builders were not trying to preserve their history, but to release it. To return their memories to the river, trusting the water to carry them beyond the reach of time. In this way, the river became a kind of guardian, holding secrets that weighed too much for a single kingdom to bear. And as we stand there, lanterns trembling gently in our hands, it feels true. The air is dense with the unspoken. The water seems older than the stone around it. The chamber feels like the breath between endings and beginnings. Suspended, sacred, unresolved. We linger, not to find answers, but to feel the presence of a truth that no longer needs words. The droplets continue their slow descent from the ceiling. Tiny constellations in motion, falling into the water with soft notes of surrender. Each ripple spreads gently across the chamber, touching the pillars, brushing against the ancient carvings, carrying a whisper of movement through a space that has known centuries of stillness. Perhaps this is how memory travels here. Through ripples, not voices. Perhaps this is how secrets are kept, not in silence, but in the soft motion of water, returning again and again to the stones that shaped it. As the lantern light dims, we take one last slow breath. The chamber offers no revelations, no grand truths carved in perfect lines. Only the sense that something vast rests beyond the threshold of understanding. Close enough to touch, yet veiled in its own gentle shadows. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, the river's whisper lingers in the air like a lullaby, soft, ancient, patient. The chamber exhales around us, and the water laps quietly at the unseen boundaries of the room, as though urging us to carry its hush back into the world above. When we ascend the staircase, the moon awaits, resting on the river's surface like a sleeping eye. The boat drifts toward us, as if it has always known when we would return. The night air is cool, fragrant with the scent of water and reeds, and somewhere behind us, the chamber settles into silence once more. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Or perhaps it waits for anyone who moves slowly enough to hear the river remembering. Either way, we leave with the feeling of having stood in the shadow of truth. Very near, yet wrapped in a tenderness that keeps its mysteries intact. And as the boat glides across the moonlit water, the river keeps its secrets, as it always has. It is said that on the kingdom's final night, when the hour sank low, and the wind stilled and as though listening, a procession began to form along the eastern courtyard. No drums, no cries, no haste, only the soft glow of lanterns, trembling like quiet stars cupped in human hands. Old storytellers speak of it in hushed tones, as if afraid their voices might disturb whatever sacred hush the moment once carried. Some claim it happened centuries ago. Others say time has no meaning when memory chooses to endure. But all versions begin with the same haunting image. A long line of figures moving toward the river, their shadows stretching like whispers along the pale stone. And so the tale unfolds. Not with urgency, but with the gentle rhythm of lantern light drifting across water. A story meant not to awaken the mind, but to guide it slowly into places where dreams gather like dew. In forgotten corners of the earth, people still carry fragments of this tale. An exodus without sorrow, a farewell without grief. Whispers tell us the procession walked as though answering a summons is spoken softly beneath the moon. A call older than dynasties, older than walls, older even than time's faithful turning. Tonight, we follow their steps. Not to uncover truth, but to feel the soft echo of what might have been. Beneath the silence of a star-marked sky, the palace gates waited half open, neither guarding nor surrendering. They were carved with glyphs so worn they no longer told stories, only breathed remnants of a meaning. Unity, dusk, return. Their sandstone pillars, once proud, now leaned inward, offering a kind of weary blessing upon all who passed. As the procession approached, the lanterns flickered against the carved arches, tracing faint spirals across the crumbled stone. Some say these spirals represented the breath of creation. Others believe they marked a celestial path the people vowed to follow. Whatever their meaning, they caught the moonlight in a way that made them seem alive, gently shifting with each step taken below. The people walked without speaking. Their silence was not heavy, nor fearful. It was soft, like listening, as if they moved in harmony with some distant memory, guiding them with a certainty that required no words. We drift behind them now, letting their pace become our own. Slow, unhurried, reverent. Past the final courtyard, the path widened into a long stretch of earth dusted in pale silver. Moonbeams glided across its surface, pooling softly in the shade of broken statues. These statues, once guardians of the kingdom's boundaries, now stood fractured and quiet, their gazes lifted toward the sky as though waiting for a sign that had already come and gone. It is said that the moon grew brighter that night, lowering itself just enough to touch the tops of the procession's lanterns. To ancient eyes, this would have been a blessing, or perhaps an invitation. Beneath the silence, one might imagine the faint rustle of robes brushing against stone, the soft crunch of dust disturbed under careful footsteps, the gentlest trembling of river reeds responding to distant movement. Yet these sounds remain imagined. The tale insists on silence. That was the gift the night carried. An unbroken calm, as though even the wind wished to honor their passage. When the procession reached the riverbank, the lantern light met its reflection with delicate grace, scattering across the surface like drifting constellations. The river had always been the kingdom's quiet companion, guiding its seasons and shaping its rituals. It was said to be an ancient spirit who listened more than it spoke, who remembered more than it revealed. Some believe this night was its final request. As the people approached the water's edge, there was no hesitation, no faltering of step. They stood in a long line facing the silver-lit surface, and for a moment the storytellers linger on as though afraid to move past it. The world held its breath. Perhaps the moon marked them then, casting its pale glow upon their lanterns, aligning the shapes of their shadows with the flowing river lines below. Perhaps the river, in return, whispered something only hearts could hear. And then, in a gesture so gentle it feels like myth, the first figure stepped forward into the water. The lantern floated beside them, bobbing softly, its flame stretched upward in a thin ribbon, caught between air and reflection. As more figures followed, The river became a path of light, a drifting procession of stars across the dark current. Some storytellers say the lanterns did not sink. Others insist they continued glowing long after the people disappeared into the mist. We walk a few steps behind them still, guided by the glow, watching the slow merging of human shadow and moonlit water. There is no fear here. Only surrender, acceptance, a return to something older than stone and soil. Whispers tell us this was not escape, not abandonment, not loss, but a homecoming. The arches behind us recede into darkness, their fading glyphs becoming indistinguishable from the night. Ahead, the river expands into a shimmering expanse, its surface sighing beneath the moon's soft touch. The procession moves deeper, lanterns now tiny halos drifting across the silver water. What were they walking toward? Where were they being called? Some legends say the river was a boundary between worlds, a quiet veil through which only the unburdened could pass. Others believe the people walked into the realm of their ancestors, guided by moonlight to reunite with origins forgotten by history. A few speak of a celestial realm hidden beneath the current, a place marked not by stone but by light, where all things return when their time has passed. We do not know. Perhaps no one ever did. The mist begins to rise as the procession nears the heart of the river. It curls around their lanterns, swallowing the golden glow until only faint halos remain. Their silhouettes fade one by one, indistinguishable from the trembling calm of the night-bound water. And then, only silence. The lanterns dim, the ripples still. The moon lowers its gaze as though closing an ancient book. Beneath the silence, the river breathes once more, carrying away the last evidence of their passing. Where memory fades, stories take root. And where stories fade, silence becomes truth. We linger on the riverbank, caught between wonder and unspoken longing. Did they vanish by fate or by choice? Did they walk into the arms of the unknown? Or did they simply return to a realm from which they had never truly been separate? Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Tonight, the river keeps its answer. The lantern reflections drift apart like scattered stars, dissolving into the night until nothing remains but a pale shimmer on the water's breath. Perhaps it was never meant to be understood. Perhaps the procession walked not into moonlight, but into the memory of moonlight. Or perhaps they simply stepped into a silence deep enough to hold all endings gently. The tale fades the way the procession did. Slowly, reverently, without ever reaching a conclusion. And as sleep begins to draw close, the river's last whisper settles across the land like a veil of dusted silver. What remains is not certainty, but wonder, and in that wonder, a soft and ancient peace. It is said that somewhere beneath the slow dreaming waters of an old river, a solitary crown sleeps beneath the silt. A circlet of river gold and woven reeds, shaped not for triumph, but for tenderness. No one knows precisely where it rests. No diver has felt its touch. No wandering monk has lifted it toward the sun. It remains hidden in the drifting quiet of the riverbed, more memory than relic, more whisper than artifact. Some believe it sank when the night was at its deepest, at that thin boundary between darkness and the first pale breath of dawn. Others say it surrendered itself to the current willingly, as though answering a call older than any kingdom. But all who speak of it agree on one truth. The crown was never taken, it was given. And so our story begins, where the river bends like a soft crescent of silver. A place where reeds sway in slow rhythm, where mist gathers in delicate veils along the shore. A place where the world feels suspended, lingering between sleep and waking. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are still those who tell the tale of the final ruler, the quiet monarch whose footsteps left more silence than sound. Their name has long since faded, carried away by centuries of wind, replaced by titles whispered reverently: the listener, the last dawnkeeper, the one who heard the river speak. We are told this ruler's reign was gentle, marked not by conquest, but by a habit of pausing to listen to the shifting stones underfoot, to the call of migrating birds, to the warnings hidden in the rustle of reeds. Their court was not a place of grand proclamation, but a sanctuary where decisions were shaped by attention rather than ambition. Whispers tell us they governed with a heart attuned to nature's breaths, the cooling sighs of dusk, the warm exhale of morning, the murmur of water curling around ancient stone, and because of this, the people trusted them, sensing that their strength was not in domination, but in the quiet steadiness of one who listens deeply. Yet kingdoms, like tides, rise and fall in rhythms no ruler can halt. As years passed, the land began to shift. The river carried fewer fish. The earth trembled with subtle warnings. The temples of sun-fired clay began to crumble at their edges, as if the elements themselves were preparing to turn the page to a new era. Some blamed neglect. Others blamed time. But those closest to the ruler believed these changes were neither punishment nor accident. Simply the natural turning of the world, a cycle the monarch had always understood. And so, on the kingdom's final night, when the moon hung low and pale as a weary guardian, the ruler walked alone to the riverbank. The palace, it is said, stood silent behind them. A broad structure of sandstone yellow and faded copper, arches open to the cool breath of night. No entourage followed. No priestly choir or counselor's voice disturbed the stillness. Only the soft rasp of reed sandals brushing along the worn earth accompanied their step. Beneath the silence, the river shimmered faintly, its surface holding the moon's reflection like a trembling silver coin. The water carried secrets in its gentle current, echoes of old festivals, memories of oars carved with star-marked symbols, songs once sung during the season of rising floods. The river remembered everything, even when people did not. The ruler paused at the water's edge. In their hands, the crown glimmered faintly. Woven reeds entwined with threads of river gold, simple yet sacred. It had never been heavy. This was its quiet power. Some legends say the ruler knelt. Others insist they remained standing, steady as a lone tree rooted at the threshold of change. But all stories converge on a single gesture. The moment the crown was placed upon the surface of the river, not tossed, not lowered with reluctance, but offered. As the crown touched the water, dawn hovered just beyond the horizon, waiting, holding its breath. The river accepted the gift slowly, with the patience of something ancient. The reeds darkened as they absorbed the coolness of the current. The gold threads flickered once, catching the last glimmer of moonlight before sinking beneath the surface. Some claim the river glowed softly then, as though cradling the crown in a cradle of pale light. Others insist a faint spiral appeared in the water, widening outward as the relic descended. These details shift from telling to telling, carried by the tide of imagination. Yet the heart of the moment remains the same. A ruler releasing their final symbol of power to the steady pull of the river's depths. And as dawn approached, the crown sank deeper. No gods witnessed the offering. No sculptor carved the scene into stone. It lived only in the breath of those who retold it, passed through generations like a lullaby recited at the threshold of sleep. The river carried the crown downward, past drifting ribbons of current that rippled like soft silk. Silver fish glided beside it, casting brief glimmers of light across the reed-woven arcs. The deeper it traveled, the dimmer the world became, shifting from moonlit silver to cool muted green. Silt drifted upward in lazy spirals, dancing like dust motes in a forgotten temple. And when the crown finally touched the riverbed, it settled gently among smooth stones, worn by centuries of flow. There, in the quiet dimness, it rested. Some believe it remains intact, preserved by the river's eternal embrace. Others imagine it softened and reshaped, becoming part of the sediment, woven into the water's story. There are tales of luminous algae clinging to its edges, making it glow faintly during moonlit nights. Tales of fish weaving around it as though guarding it. Tales of distant starlight piercing the surface and touching its faded gold. These are only stories. Yet stories have their own kind of truth. The legend of the sinking crown has always been less about treasure than about the spirit of letting go. It speaks of a leader who understood that power is not a throne or a title, but a responsibility held only for a time. And that true wisdom is knowing when to release it, returning it to the world from which it was shaped. Perhaps that is why the tale endures. Why even now listeners feel a soft ache when imagining the crown drifting into the depths. Where memory fades, symbols endure. Where symbols soften, stories rise. And where stories fall silent, new dreams wait to be born. As we drift toward the closing breaths of this tale, imagine the riverbed once more. Dim, serene, timeless. The crown lies half buried in tilt, its gold dulled yet not diminished. Starlight from above filters through the water in tremulous beams, touching its edges as though reminding it of its once sacred role. The river does not speak, yet its silence is full of what was surrendered, and full of what will rise again in other forms, in other ages. Perhaps the crown was never meant to be found. Perhaps its purpose was to vanish softly, like the final exhale of a kingdom ready to sleep. Or perhaps it remains as a reminder that even in loss, there is a quiet, luminous beauty. Night settles, the water sighs, and the crown continues its eternal rest in the river's gentle embrace, catching the distant glow of heavens that shift endlessly above. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Tonight, the river has offered its whisper, and now it returns to silence, carrying the crown, the memory, and the dawn that almost was. It is said that in ages when the world breathed differently, when nights carried a deeper silence and the moon felt nearer to the earth, the river that wound through the kingdom did something few could explain. Under certain moons, thin crescents marked by a faint silver halo, the water would glow. Not brightly, not with any earthly radiance, but with a pale, trembling shimmer like starlight caught in mental motion. Along the surface, lines appeared, drifting in and out of sight, as if the river were unfurling a map made of light rather than land. Some called it a trick of reflection, a passing whim of clouds. Others whispered that it was a message meant only for those who could see with more than eyes. For beneath the silence of that river, beneath the silt and rising tide, lay secrets long dissolved into memory's slow forgetting. The glowing map was said to be their echo, a faint yet stubborn reminder of paths that once mattered. Tonight, let us walk toward that ancient shore. In forgotten corners of the earth, the river still moves with the same patient rhythm. Its surface appears ordinary under most skies. A soft ripple, a muted glint, the gentle drifting of reeds. But imagine standing there on a night when stars gather like watchful candles above the water. Imagine the moon lifting itself through a haze of mist, its reflection trembling as though the world were exhaling. Then, the first glimmer. A thin line of pale fire traces itself across the current. It is not steady, nor sharp, but quivers gently, like a memory trying to return. Then another line appears, intersecting the first in a subtle curve. Soon the river becomes a tapestry of shifting veins, glowing softly in patterns no scholar could fully decipher. Vespers tell us that the kingdom's priests believed these lines to be messages, fluid prophecies drawn by the moon and water in quiet partnership. The patterns shifted with the seasons, with storms, with tides of motion that no chronicle attempted to record. Some believed the signs foretold the fate of temples now crumbled into dust. Others believed the flowing map guided travelers towards sacred valleys where the oldest rituals were once kept alive by flame and song. The river, they said, was not merely water. It was memory in motion. And so, for centuries, monks tended to the river's edge, watching with a devotion that required neither reward nor witness. Cloaked in silence, they sat for hours on stone banks, carved by the generations before them. They carried reed scrolls and thin charcoal sticks, their hands steady even when their hearts wavered. When the moon reached its mark in the sky, they waited for the glowing lines to reveal themselves. Faint, elusive, delicate as spider silk. Some nights nothing happened, and the river remained dark. On other nights, the surface shimmered so strongly that even the trees along the shore seemed to lean inward, listening. It is said the monks wrote tirelessly. They drew the lines exactly as they saw them, spirals resembling ancient constellations, arcs that hinted at lost roads, branching streams that resembled the veins of some forgotten god. They believed the lines were alive, that each glow was a new form of breath. Their maps, drawn on thin reeds pressed flat and cured in fading sunlight, were kept in small clay shelters near the river. The shelters have long since collapsed. The reeds have softened back into the earth that birthed them. But the idea remains that once a civilization trusted signs written not in stone, but in liquid light. Imagine now that shimmering river. See how the lines flicker, brightening and dimming with the moon's slow heartbeat. They never stayed still. Some stretched toward the northern mountains, their light trailing like incense smoke. Others curled into spirals, so intricate the eye could not follow them without drifting into a trance. There were moments when the entire river seemed to lift upward, its glowing lines merging with the stars above, creating a seamless sky both above and below. Those who witnessed this said the river mirrored not the heavens we see, but the heavens we forget. A celestial map drawn from memory's deeper ocean. The priest believed the glowing lines were not simply reflections of stars, but reflections of time. Like veins of prophecy, they marked where rituals had once taken place, where temples had once stood, where voices had once risen in song beneath the moon's patient gaze. Though those places had crumbled or been swallowed by forest and sand, the river remembered. Water, after all, carries stories farther than wind ever can. Beneath the silence of this night, imagine a monk kneeling at the water's edge. His reed parchment rests on his lap. He does not rush. He waits, letting the patterns unfold as gently as seeds drifting on air. The river glows like the breath of an old god, and he traces the lines with quiet reverence. The strokes he draws are simple, thin, curved, sometimes broken. They do not resemble any map we know. There are no borders, no landmarks, no symbols of human claiming. Instead, the lines flow as the river flows, free, unowned, shaped by forces older than kingdoms. When his work is done, he lifts the parchment and lets it dry beside a small clay lamp. In the faint amber light, the lines appear more tangible, though still mysterious. He believes they are prophecies, yes, but not of events. They are prophecies of movement, of the eternal shifting of the world, of cycles unseen by those who seek only certainty. We drift now through these imagined parchments. Some show spirals like galaxies rendered in ink, swirling at the heart of the river's flow. Others reveal lines that break abruptly, symbolizing forgotten migrations or storms that reshape the land. Some appear blank at first. Only when held to flame does the faintest glow emerge, echoing the river's own light. The monks stored these scrolls in jars sealed with clay lids, marked by the moon's crescent. Over centuries, the jars cracked. Water seeped in. The reeds softened, broke apart, dissolved into silt. All that remains now is a faint idea that once a people trusted guidance written in water. Where memory fades, meaning may still remain. As the chapter unfolds, imagine yourself beside that river. The night air is cool. The glow is subtle, not overwhelming. You kneel, as countless watchers before you once did. The river feels alive, not loud, but deeply aware. You notice a line drifting by. It bends toward your shadow, then shifts as if reconsidering. Another line follows, looping gracefully before fading into the darker water. Together they form a pattern you almost understand, something like a map, something like a heartbeat, something like a path that leads inward rather than outward. Perhaps this was always the river's intention, to guide not across land, but across spirit. Beneath the silence, the glowing map trembles, reshaping itself with each breath of wind. You reach toward the water. The surface cools your fingertips. The light beneath ripples gently, softening around your touch. It feels as though you are brushing the edge of a story too delicate to grasp, too ancient to claim. And then, as quickly as it appeared, the shimmering begins to fade. The lines dissolve, drawn back into the current like thoughts slipping away at the edge of sleep. The glow thins, dims, and finally disappears entirely, leaving only the quiet river drifting under a dimming moon. A hush settles over the land, Whispers tell us the river chooses its moments carefully, that it reveals its map only to those who arrive without seeking answers. Perhaps it was never meant to be understood. Perhaps it was never meant to be kept. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. As the night deepens, the river becomes once more a simple stretch of water. The moon lifts higher, its reflection steady and unbroken. You rise slowly, sensing that the map has left an imprint not on your eyes, but somewhere quieter. A small shifting within the soul, like a lantern lit in a forgotten chamber. Far downstream, where reeds bend and shadows gather, a faint shimmer rises again. Just a flicker. Barely there, almost shy. It glows for a moment, a single arc of light drawn, cross the current, then fades like a silent breath. And the river continues its slow, unceasing journey, carrying with it the remnants of maps long dissolved, meanings washed away, guidance offered and withdrawn like a promise whispered in dream. No conclusion arrives, no answer settles. Only the soft wonder remains. That once the night was illuminated not by torches or stars alone, but by a silent map drawn in flowing light. It is said that in certain forgotten ages, before the river grew heavy with silt and memory, there stood a grand staircase carved from pale stone, its steps descending toward a sanctuary, touched only by priests and drifting moonlight. Now, that staircase sleeps beneath layers of water. Water that has darkened over centuries, softened by sediment, woven with reeds, and thick with the breaths of fish that wander like small spirits in the gloom. Tonight, we begin there, at the threshold of a stairway that no longer rises nor falls, but simply exists beneath the quiet weight of the river. In the soft dark of your imagination, let the water clear. Let the drifting particles boil like ancient dust. And slowly, as if guided by a lantern whose flame cannot disturb the silence, a shape begins to reveal itself. First a single step, then another, then a long procession of stone, wide, solemn, and carved with symbols glowing faintly beneath a veil of time. Here is our opening image. The submerged staircase, a poem carved upon its bones, breathing in the deep. Some believe this staircase was once alive with ceremony, that priests in robes of rivergrass green would walk its length at dawn, their shadows trembling gently against the sandstone walls. Others say that rulers stepped here only once in their lifetime, the night before coronation, to whisper their gratitude into the river's first breath. But all traditions agree on one thing. The poem carved along the steps was sacred, older than the kingdom itself, older perhaps than the river that embraced it. Beneath the silence, you can almost sense it still. A hum, a ripple, a memory of words that once held the power to steady a kingdom's pulse. And so we descend. Not with haste, never with haste, but with long, drifting attention, the kind that only arrives when the world grows quiet enough to hear its own heartbeat. One step below the surface, we find faint glyphs, softened by water's patient touch. They are unreadable now. Fragments of spirals, echoes of stars, threads of ancient ink now dissolved into the river's body. It is said that the poem began with the birth of the river itself, describing how a single drop of dawnlight fell from the sky and carved the first channel through sleeping earth. Some scholars believe the poem spoke of an age when the river glowed under starlight, guiding wanderers by its shimmering pulse. Others whispered that within the poem's final verses lay a prophecy of endings. The slow flood that would swallow the staircase stone by stone. But no one can verify these stories. The poem is lost. Its ink has returned to water. Its meaning now drifts, like silt dissolving into a current that remembers more than it reveals. Where memory fades, imagination awakens. As we drift deeper, more steps appear. Reed fragments drift across their surfaces like offerings left by the river itself. A thin school of silver fish moves through the shadows, scattering tiny reflections. The staircase seems endless now, descending farther than any earthly measure. One might say it feels like descending through time. Each step an era, each glyph a breath from someone long gone. Whispers tell us that monks dedicated their entire lives to watching how the river touched these steps. They believed water was a messenger, a sacred intermediary between sky and soil. Where it pooled, truth gathered. Where it ebbed, clarity emerged. They knelt by the staircase at dusk, waiting for moonlight to ripple along the carvings. On certain nights, it is said, the glyphs shimmered faintly, as though relit from within. A gentle reminder that even submerged words can still glimmer with quiet meaning. Some of these monks created scrolls, delicate sheets of reed parchment that recorded the poem line by line. But reeds decay, ink fades, and time is always hungry. Only fragments remain, brittle and faint, like whispers stored in a shell. Scholars have tried to reconstruct the poem from these remnants, but each attempt feels incomplete, as if the river refuses to surrender its secrets fully. We descend another few steps in the mind's gentle theatre. The water grows cooler here, smoother, more ancient. On the left wall of the staircase, half buried beneath moss and shadow, a mural once depicted the kingdom's creation story. You can see only pieces now. A sweep of blue suggesting sky, a carved hand releasing a droplet of light, the faint arc of a river coiling like a serpent through a field of stars. The edges of the mural crumble when imagined fingers brush them, dissolving into soft clouds of silt. Yet there is still something alive in these fragments, something that resists complete silence. Perhaps it is the devotion of the hands that carved them. Perhaps it is the river's memory, refusing to let the story go. Or perhaps it is simply the nature of sacred things to linger. Some claim that beneath the staircase lies a hidden hall. The temple once sought by rulers and pilgrims, now sealed beneath centuries of flood. They say the hall was illuminated by torches that burned with a white flame, their light reflected in bowls of moving water placed at each pillar's base. The floor was said to be carved into spirals that represented the river's eternal turning, the endless union of creation and dissolution. No one has seen this hall in living memory. But sometimes, in stories passed down like lullabies, children speak of dreams where they walk those silent chambers, dreams where the water glows, and the poem whispers itself back into being. Dreams where voices that sound older than stone say, all things return to their beginning, all rivers remember their first breath. Whether these visions are memories, myths, or something gentler than truth hardly matters. The staircase itself, even drowned, continues to teach. Its silences is not emptiness. Its erosion is not erasure. There is meaning even in its fading. A gentle teaching about impermanence, about the way even sacred words must someday dissolve, allowing new stories to rise like silt stirred by a slow current. We descend a final few steps. The water here is thick, stirred only by the smallest movements of unseen life. A soft glow emerges, not from torchlight, nor from glyph, but from the way faint moonlight refracts through the river above. It bends and breaks, creating gentle ribbons of silver that dance along the submerged on stone. It is easy, in this quiet moment, to imagine the poem returning. A line of creation here, a hymn of gratitude, that's it. A verse praising the river's gift of nourishment and its power or destruction. But the lines never settle. They drift, they shimmer, they dissolve. And perhaps, that is how the poem was always meant to be read. Not as fixed scripture, but as movement, as breath, as water. In forgotten corners of the earth, some elders still believe that the staircase hums faintly, on nights when the moon hangs low and heavy, that if one places an ear to the riverbank above, they can sense a distant, resonant echo, a sound like words spoken underwater, like prayers carried through currents, a sound like remembrance. But the river continues its slow work. Sand gathers, silt deepens, the staircase grows heavier with time's embrace. One day, it may sink completely beneath the riverbed, sealed forever in darkness. And yet, even then, something tells us the poem will persist. Not in form, not in letters, but in the gentle truth that sacred things never vanish fully. They merely change shape, they dissolve into currents that touch far shores. They fade into whispers carried by reeds. As we rise back from the depths in our wandering imagination, the staircase grows dim behind us. The glyphs lose their glimmer. The water takes back its shadows. The river resumes its long, patient breathing. And the poem, that fragile ribbon of devotion carved beneath the flood, returns to silence. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps its meaning was always meant to drift. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Tonight, that echo accompanies you into the dark. Gentle, ancient, unending. A whisper carried by water and time. And slowly, the staircase fades, step by step, into the murky depths beyond memory, leaving its echoes to breathe quietly in a night untouched by time. In the hush before thought, before even the breath remembers its own rhythm, an image begins to shimmer. It rises like mist from forgotten waters, soft, luminous, and trembling with a pale memory of starlight. It is the vision said to greet those who seek the first whispers of an ancient festival, the one once held on the night the river was believed to have first appeared in the newborn world. They called it the river's first dawn, though there was no sun within that name, only the quiet glow of celestial waters, flowing out of darkness as if the sky had melted its earliest constellation into the earth. In old songs, it is murmured that the river carried the shimmer of the heavens in its earliest currents, weaving light through soil and stone, leaving silver traces wherever it passed. And so, long ago, at the turning of each year, people gathered at its banks to honor that arrival. Slow, reverent, wrapped in a silence so complete it was said that even the river listened. It is said the celebration began before the kingdom had a name. Before walls, before scripts etched into clay, before the first ancestor lifted eyes to the stars and whispered a prayer. The night of the festival was a night where time softened. Lanterns shaped like moons were carved from reed and thin wood, coated with pale dust so they gleamed softly, even before flame touched them. When lit, their glow was tender, never bright. A reminder that this ritual was meant not to awaken the world, but to soothe it. Such lanterns were released onto the river's surface like drifting fragments of the sky. A delicate procession honoring the water's unbroken journey. Whispers tell us that a gentle hush fell over the valley, long before the first lantern touched the water. People gathered barefoot on the smooth stones along the river's edge, their steps slow, their gestures unhurried. No loud music accompanied the ritual. Only a low humming, more breath than sound, shaped by dozens of voices rising and falling like small waves. Elders said this humming was the river's own language, taught to them in a dream that belonged to no single generation. Perhaps it was true. Perhaps it was simply the sort of story a people weave when they long to feel the pulse of the natural world. But beneath the silence, the songs linger still. Lantern by lantern, the procession formed. A long ribbon of pale orbs gliding over dark water. Each one carried a fragment of a memory or regret. Each one drifted slowly downstream, swaying as though in conversation with unseen currents. Children watched from behind their parents' robes, their eyes wide as distant moons. Lovers traced each other's palms, believing the river blessed any vow spoken at its edge. Hermits and sages leaned on staffs carved with spirals and stars, listening for a message older than their own longing. And above them all, the night sky opened like a patient scroll, revealing constellations said to guide the festival's rites. There was the river star, burning faintly with the cool light of ancient oceans. The stone spiral, marking the place where ancestors believed the world began its first breath. And the veiled twin, two stars hidden behind a haze of dust, visible only to those whose hearts moved with the rhythm of water. In forgotten corners of the valley, these constellations were believed to shape the year's destiny. A bright river star meant abundant rains, a dim one meant hardship. The sky, the river, and the people existed in a thread of quiet mutual listening. As the years unfurled, new rituals blossomed like reeds along the banks. Offerings were placed upon polished stones. Dried herbs, small bowls of salted grain, smooth pebbles marked with faint spirals. Some carried small wooden discs inscribed with their family's symbol, a gesture of remembrance for those who had returned to the earth. It was believed that anything left on the stones was accepted by the river, not because it washed them away, but because the wind carried the prayers whispered into them. These prayers were spoken with lips barely parted, wishes for health, murmurs of gratitude, pleas for forgiveness. They floated into the reeds, hidden but never lost. And always the humming remained, soft, circular, eternal. Through centuries, the festival grew but never quickened. It merely deepened, like sediment settling slowly at the bottom of a sacred basin. Children grew into keepers of the ritual. Keepers grew into elders who knew the myths by heart. They told of the first people who followed the river from a far-off spring hidden behind a mountain shrouded in perpetual fog. They spoke of how the river once glowed faintly at night, carrying star ashes that had fallen during the world's youth. And they recalled, in hushed tones, a prophecy that claimed the festival would fade when the people began to forget the sound of their own river. It took many generations for that forgetting to unfold. No single event erased the festival. No war or disaster broke it entirely. Instead, it slipped gently into neglect. the way faint ripples vanish at the edge of the pool. The kingdom grew busy with trade, with borders, with politics that tugged attention away from the quiet rites of the river's dawn. Roads were built, markets expanded, scholars debated the meaning of old myths, replacing their soft poetry with sharpened logic. The river remained, flowing as it always had, but fewer lanterns found their way to its surface. The moon-shaped designs were replaced with simple wooden bowls. The humming faded as voices turned their attention to more urgent matters. Even the stones where offerings had once been placed were repurposed for construction, carved into columns or left to crumble under the weight of time. Yet some say that even as the crowd thinned, the river remembered. On certain nights, when the moon hung low and mist curled along the banks like a waiting spirit, an unlit lantern could be found drifting on the water. No one knew who placed it there. No footprint was found on the stones, no trace of wax or reed left behind. Some believed it was the river itself calling for remembrance. Others thought it was a quiet act by those too ashamed to admit they still cherished the old ways. Where memory fades, the river waits. Eventually, there came a night, unremarkable to most, when the last human-lit lantern was released. An elder whose name was not preserved, whose family line ended in silence, shaped the small moon herself. She carried it to the water, humming alone, a thin trembling sound swallowed quickly by the valley's darkened air. When she set the lantern afloat, the light wavered as though unsure. But then it steadied, glowing faintly against the current. It drifted until the darkness claimed it. After that night, the festival became a story passed from one generation to a smaller one, then to none at all. The kingdom aged. Its walls cracked. The last of its scholars dismissed the myths as symbolic. Its temples emptied. Its fields grew wild. The river, unconcerned, slid quietly through every season. And yet, in the deep hush of places time forgets, something of the festival lingers. It is said that if one visits the river on the forgotten night of its dawn, a night now lost to calendars, found only by listening, one might glimpse a faint glow drifting downstream. Not bright, not warm, just the soft, trembling suggestion of a lantern shaped like a moon. Some believe this glow is made of starlight, the same ancient shimmer that once blessed the first currents. Others believe it is memory itself, refusing to extinguish. A tender echo of celebration that once danced beside the river's birth. Perhaps it is neither. Perhaps it is merely the way water catches the sky. But if you stand at the edge of that silent river and close your eyes, you may feel the old humming stir in your chest. A slow vibration, soft as a breath, and you may wonder, in the dim hush before sleep takes you, whether the festival truly ended, or whether it simply sank gently into the river's depths, waiting for someone to hear its whisper again. For some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some lights drift through the darkness even when no hands remain to release them. In forgotten corners of the earth, where ancient kingdoms once dreamed beneath the wide and whispering sky, there lies a stone outcrop overlooking a quiet river bend. It rises not boldly, but with the solemn grace of something that has been waiting for ages. A place shaped by patience, softened by wind, and touched endlessly by drifting petals that fall from unseen trees. It is said that on this lonely perch, a solitary oracle once lived, listening not to the voices of kings or priests, but to the soft murmur of water itself. Some believe the oracle's name has long since dissolved into dust, carried away by time's unblinking tide. Others claim the name was never spoken aloud, for to know it would have been to disturb the fragile equilibrium between the human spirit and the river's eternal memory. And so her existence lingers only in fragments, half-remembered verses etched on broken tablets, a scattering of star-marked scrolls found near abandoned river shrines, and stories whispered by those who still walk the river at dusk, searching for echoes of the past. The chapter begins with this solitary figure, cloaked not in garments, but in silence, though her face is lost to history. The image of her presence endures, kneeling upon the outcrop, head bowed, listening. Beneath her, the river bends with deliberate softness, as though lowering its voice to share secrets meant only for the patient. Lanterns once drifted here during festivals now forgotten, their pale lights brushing against the water's skin. And in the tremble of their reflections, the oracle found omens, hints of what was, what might be, and what could never come to pass. It is said the river welcomed her not as a visitor, but as a companion. Its voice changed with the seasons, crisp in winter, playful in spring, heavy with silt and memory during the long sun-soaked summers. But always, beneath the shifting tones, there lay a constant rhythm, a pulse that echoed through the bones of the earth. Many dismissed such murmurs as mere current and stone. But the oracle knew that water is the oldest storyteller, older than sand, older than wind, older than the first human breath that ever shaped a prayer. Whispers tell us that the oracle's wisdom did not come from scrolls or carved tablets. She read no books, for she believed that knowledge written by hands was knowledge already distanced from truth. Instead, she studied the river's changing patterns. The slow curl of an eddy, the abrupt flicker of a current reversed by unseen stones, the way drifting petals gathered in spirals before dissolving downstream. These were her letters, these were her scriptures. Some mornings, she would place a single reed on the water and watch how it drifted, whether it spun or glided, whether it snagged on a submerged root or passed unhindered into the wider flow. The movement became prophecy, a gentle rotation meant peace. A sudden halt meant conflict brewing like thunder beyond the horizon. A drifting reed that refused to sink meant hope. A rare omen that she noted with a quiet nod, though her heart, it is said, never clung to such promises. In this sacred communion, words were unnecessary. The oracle's breath aligned with the river's rhythm, her thoughts dissolving into its patient currents. Those who sought her counsel approached only in silence, leaving offerings at the base of the outcrop, clay bowls, polished stones, small spirals etched into bone or wood. They never remained long, for even the most earnest visitor sensed they were intruding on a delicate dialogue between earth and soul. As the kingdom beyond the river expanded, its markets growing loud, its leaders growing proud, the oracle remained still, listening. She heard the river's concerns long before the people did. Beneath the surface murmurs, beneath the silver ripples and moonlit swells, new notes began to form. Heavy notes, buried notes, notes weighted with dust and sorrow. Where memory fades, the water remembers. Seasons passed, and the river's song darkened. The current slowed in unusual ways, pausing with a heaviness that made the oracle's eyes lift in wordless alarm. Leaves floated differently. Birds flew lower. Even the wind seemed to hesitate at the cliffs of. When the first fragments of ruin washed down from the northern villages, tiny pieces of charcoal, shredded bark with the faint smell of smoke. The oracle already knew. The kingdom was faltering. It is said she tried to warn them, though no written account survives of this attempt. Some stories claim she carved spirals into the soft riverbank, hoping the shapes would be read by wandering scribes. Others claim she released dozens of reeds, each bearing a charcoal mark, letting the river carry her silent messages to those prepared to understand. But the reeds drifted past bustling markets, past temples preoccupied with rituals, past soldiers who watched only for physical threats. No one listened. Not truly. And so the oracle returned to her outcrop, returned to waiting, returned to listening. Days folded into years. Years folded into the timeless hush of inevitability. The kingdom grew weaker, not by sudden tragedy, but by a gradual forgetting. Forgetting of old stories, of old festivals, of the river itself. Its people turned inward, their hearts cluttered with ambition and fear. The river, once greeted with lanterns and quiet songs, now flowed alone. Beneath the silence, the oracle felt the weight of unspoken warnings pressing through the currents. The water trembled with messages too vast, too ancient, too mournful to translate into human language. And the oracle, kneeling on her stone outcrop, felt sorrow settle softly into her bones. Not despair. She knew despair had no place in sacred listening, but a gentle ache for a world drifting away from its own roots. Legend tells that on the kingdom's final night, the river carried no lanterns, no petals, no prayer-marked stones. Only darkness glided along its surface. The oracle knelt as she always had, pressing her palms to the cool rock. The current whispered frantically, its rhythm unsteady, its voice thick with the prophecy of endings. And then, without a sound, she vanished. Some believe she stepped into the river and was dissolved into its memory, becoming part of the ancient song she had spent her life hearing. Others believe she climbed the stone spiral that once stood behind her dwelling, though no such structure remains today, and walked into the sky, leaving no trace. A few claim she transformed into a single bead of grandeur, eternally drifting, eternally listening. What remains, however, is undeniable. Upon the outcrop where she once knelt, a stone bowl was found, carved from river-smoothed granite, perfectly round and filled with still water that never evaporated. Even during drought, even during storms, the water inside the bowl remained calm, as though guarded by an unseen hand. Those who approached it described a strange phenomenon. The moon, whether crescent, full or hidden behind clouds, reflected with uncanny clarity in the bowl's surface. Clearer, some said, than in the river itself. Clearer even than in natural pools. The reflection seemed alive, shifting not with wind or movement, but with the quiet pulse of unseen tides. A lunar echo contained within stone. With time, the kingdom fell completely. Ivy consumed its temples. Dust reclaimed its ink-marked scrolls. Statues crumbled beneath slow, patient centuries. But the bowl remained on the outcrop, untouched by ruin. Even now, travelers speak of it. They say its surface trembles at times. Not from breeze, for the air around it is strangely still, but from something deeper. Perhaps memory, perhaps a message, perhaps the lingering resonance of an oracle who listened until the end. Some believe the trembling means the river is still speaking, its voice echoing from worlds beyond sight. Others believe it is the oracle herself, whispering through the water, waiting for someone patient enough to understand its ancient cadence. Or perhaps it is merely the way moonlight shifts as sleep approaches. There is no clear ending, only the bowl, only the tremble, only the soft impression that wisdom, once heard, never fully disappears. For some voices speak only through silence, and some currents, once listened to, continue forever beneath the world's forgotten surface. It is said that where the river bends into a slow, deliberate curve, a place where the water seems to hesitate, as though remembering an older course, there stands a single stone lantern. Few know how old it is. Fewer still know who carved it or why it was placed at the edge of a ford, long since swallowed by the river's patient hunger. Yet there it remains, a small guardian of a path that no longer exists, softened by centuries of wind, mist, and drifting silt. In forgotten corners of the earth, relics sometimes wait longer than the memories that birthed them. The lantern is such a relic, a survivor of tides, rains, quiet abandonment. Its stone surface is veined with faded spirals as if marked by hands that once understood the secret geometry of thresholds. Those sacred places where one world leans into another. And as dusk settles across the riverbank, a hush seems to gather around it, as though even the wind bows in respect to its long vigil. Some believe the lantern once marked the beginning of a ceremonial walkway, a path that led travelers across the ford to the heart of an ancient kingdom. Others whisper that priests once tended to its flame, lighting it on moon-marked nights so that pilgrims could cross safely, guided by the soft glow reflecting across shallow waters. The ford itself has vanished, drowned gradually by the river's shifting moods. But the lantern, rooted deep into the earth, remains, like a memory carved in stone. Whispers tell us that, under certain alignments of stars, the lantern glows faintly, not with the brightness of fire, but with a gentle bluish shimmer that seems woven from starlight itself. Those who have claimed to witness it describe the glow as neither warm nor cold, but something in between, the exact hue of forgotten dreams. The glow does not reveal the path, it merely suggests it, casting subtle reflections across the water's surface, as though guiding only those who walk with reverence and quiet intent. On such rare nights, the river seems different. Its ripples soften, its voice deepens. Pebbles gleam beneath the water, as if illuminated from below. If one listens closely enough, beneath the silence, one might almost hear footsteps. Echoes of travelers who once crossed the ford, long before the kingdom's decline. But these are memories, not sounds. Echoes, not presences. The river remembers long after the world forgets. As we wander deeper into this story, the lantern becomes more than an object. It becomes an invitation, a threshold through which countless tales might pass. In its presence, one senses the lingering breath of a kingdom that once flourished on the far bank. Scholars argue over its origins. Some claim it belongs to a line of river shrine markers or found across other regions, each aligned with celestial cycles. Others insist it was carved by a wandering order of stonemasons known for embedding secrets in their work. Spirals to mark hidden wells, star-shaped carvings to indicate ancient burial paths, and veiled symbols that warned of waters that shifted with the seasons. The lantern bears several such symbols. On its base is a faint, star-marked impression, so delicate that it seems etched by moonlight rather than tools. On its side, barely visible beneath lichen, is a spiral that curls inward, as though pointing towards something beneath the river. And at its crown, where a flame might once have burned, lies a bowl-shaped hollow filled with dust, rainwater, and fallen leaves. Even empty, the hollow gives the impression that something unseen still dwells there, quietly echoing through time. To stand before the lantern is to feel the boundary between past and present soften. One can almost imagine the path that once stretched from its foundation. A walkway paved with clay-colored tiles, each one stamped with symbols of breath, wave, and moon. These tiles, now submerged, lie scattered beneath the water like fragments of a dream. If the river is low, a few may glint briefly in the twilight, only to disappear again when the current shifts. They are reminders of a route that once welcomed wanderers, pilgrims, and emissaries to the kingdom beyond. Where memory fades, imagination steps in. One might picture the way the path looked before it drowned, lined with river reeds that leaned toward travelers as though greeting them. Offerings left on carved pedestals, small jars of fragrant oils, folded scrolls bearing quiet prayers, smooth stones collected from distant shores. All these things, like the path, have long since disappeared, but their presence lingers in the hush that surrounds the lantern, in the way the mist drifts around it like a veil, in the way the earth seems unwilling to let go of what was once sacred. As night deepens, the lantern's quiet authority becomes even more pronounced. The river darkens into a mirror of the sky, reflecting stars that sway with the water's gentle motion. If clouds drift overhead, the lantern appears almost to breathe with the shifting light, exhaling silence into the air. Travelers of old might have paused here, their footsteps slowing, not from fear, but from reverence. They would have bowed their heads, murmuring soft thanks to the guardian of the threshold. Some stories say the lantern's glow was meant only for those who carried a burden of truth. Others claim it guided souls rather than bodies, leading the weary across unseen realms. Still others, more mystical in nature, insist that the lantern was forged not by human hand, but by those who understood the language of rivers and stars. Beings who shaped stone with intention rather than tools. Such tales hover at the edge of myth, yet in the lantern's presence, even the impossible feels gently plausible. And what of the drowned path? What remains of it beneath the water? If one were to walk into the river on a calm day, toes brushing against the softened tiles, one might feel the faint geometry of the walkway beneath layers of silt. Broken offerings lie scattered there. A cracked bowl with spiraled etchings, a bronze charm dulled by centuries, shards of votive candles encased in hardened sediment. All these relics sleep beneath the surface, guarded not by gates or walls, but by distance. The quiet distance between now and then. There is a melancholy woven into the river's song, a soft lament for the countless footsteps that once crossed here, footsteps of merchants carrying rare cloth, footsteps of musicians traveling to perform at seasonal festivals, footsteps of kings who walked barefoot during rites of renewal, and yes, footsteps of those who turned back, sensing the path was not meant for them, or that the river demanded patience rather than passage. Time has buried the path, but not the memory of those footsteps. The river holds them like breath stored between currents, and the lantern, silent, unblinking, keeps watch. As we drift toward the closing of this night-wrapped tale, imagine standing beside the lantern under an overcast sky. The stars are faint. The moon hides behind a thin veil of cloud. The river murmurs in low tones, neither urgent nor tired, simply present. The lantern's stone is cool beneath your fingertips, textured with centuries of dust and rain. And though it does not glow now, you sense a quiet endurance pulsing from within it. Beneath the silence that it seems to say, paths do not vanish. They simply change their shape. Perhaps the drowned walkway is still there in spirit, a passage woven from memory rather than stone. Perhaps those who pause long enough to listen can feel its direction. Not with their eyes, but with the subtle awareness that comes when the world grows still. The lantern's dimness becomes a gentle reminder. Even when ways are lost, their echoes remain. You can almost see them. Faint, starlit threads stretching across the water, guiding those who walk with intention. Those who understand that disappearance is not the end, merely a shift in form. And as night deepens further, the lantern seems to blend into the riverbank, becoming part of the landscape, part of the silence, part of the long, slow breath of time. The drowned path, though unseen, feels close. Closer than footsteps, closer than the mist that drifts along the water's edge. Perhaps it was never meant to be found again. Perhaps it waits for the right traveler, one who walks not to arrive but to understand. Or perhaps some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And so we leave the lantern in its quiet vigil, its presence a soft flicker against the vastness of night, a guardian of what was, a witness to what remains, a reminder that even in the deepest forgetting, something endures, faint as starlight on water, steady as stone. It is said that on certain nights, when the river exhales a thin veil of mist across its darkened surface, a faint shape stirs beneath the water, as if an old door, long sealed by silt and sleep, shifts ever so slightly. Some whisper that it is not a ruin, not a stone, but the dreaming threshold of an ancient library that once guarded the kingdom's earliest breath of memory, a place built not to be visited, but to be forgotten, a refuge crafted for silence itself. Tonight, let us drift toward that hidden shore. In the fading hush of twilight, the riverbank appears ordinary enough. Reeds bending in the mild wind, mud soft underfoot, the slow murmur of water gliding past like a lullaby meant for the earth alone. Yet beneath this unassuming facade lies a secret, older than the first star charts inked by human hands. Beneath this quiet fringe of land waits a sanctuary carved into clay chambers, a labyrinth of knowledge now swallowed by time's patient tide. Legend tells us that long before the river shifted its wandering course, a circle of quiet scholars tended a treasury of reed scrolls inscribed with the kingdom's most fragile truths. They were caretakers not of power nor of pride, but of the intangible, mythic songs, constellations mapped in spirals of ink, the first hymns whispered to the dawn. They guarded the soft histories of a people who believed that memory itself was a sacred element, vital as breath, as fluid as water. In forgotten corners of the earth, such guardians once shaped their work with a simple vow. Let nothing precious be lost to flame or fear. And so they built deep chambers near the river's roots, where damp clay walls preserved what parchment could not. They shaped tiny alcoves for scrolls of woven reeds, sealed them in jars of sun-hardened earth, and traced protective marks across each lid. Stars for the astronomers, spirals for the storytellers, crescent moons for the keepers of old prayers. Whispers tell us that these scholars rarely spoke. Their footsteps were the softest winds across sand, their tools mere echoes in the drifting light. Silence was their ally, for silence preserves what noise shatters. Silence nourishes memory, the way water feeds the slow, stubborn river reeds. Over the centuries, the river moved as it always does, shaping, eroding, forgetting its own past. Its waters crept outward, inch by patient inch, swallowing the lower chambers first, then the upper alcoves, until one day the entrance itself sank beneath a curtain of green water. The scholars had vanished long before this happened, their names now dissolved like ink in the current. Only the library remained behind, sealed in a world where fish glide through hallways once lined with thought, and silt gathers like sleeping dust upon secrets never meant to surface again. Some believe the chambers were hidden deliberately, not merely by accident of nature's drift. They say the kingdom saw war looming, a conflict that threatened to devour all that was sacred. And so the scholars, unwilling to see their scrolls burned or twisted into tools of power, entrusted them to the river. The water, they believed, was a gentler keeper than any conqueror. After all, memory stored in a sleeping tide cannot be stolen, only dreamed. Others believe the library's burial was an accident, a slow tragedy unnoticed by the world. But perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the quiet space between those beliefs, where myth and history blur like footprints washed away by rain. Tonight, with the moon casting a pale shimmer across the drifting reeds, imagine yourself stepping into those submerged halls. Imagine descending through a soft corridor of clay, your fingers brushing walls marked by symbols nearly erased. Beneath the silence, you feel the air grow cooler, heavier, as though the river's breath lingers here in suspended stillness. And then, the first chamber. Clay jars rest in neat rows, though many have cracked with age. Their broken pieces reveal scrolls curled like sleeping creatures, reeds softened by centuries of water's subtle touch. You reach toward one, and the moment your fingertips graze its surface, it sighs into dust. A gentle collapse, like the final breath of something that waited too long to be remembered. Dust drifts upward in slow spirals, catching the faint light like particles of a forgotten dawn. It hangs around you like suspended breath, like the quiet remnants of a dream breaking apart. Perhaps the jar once held the kingdom's earliest map of the heavens, lines drawn in trembling strokes to track the moon's wandering path. Perhaps it held a hymn meant to be sung near the river's edge at sunrise, a melody now dissolved into nothing but the whisper of water against stone. In another chamber, you find shelves carved directly into the clay. They sag under the weight of time, but still hold fragments of writing. A sliver of reed etched with spirals, a shard of clay marked with star signs, a tiny pinch of pigment from a mural long since devoured by silt. Everything is fragile here, everything on the verge of disappearance. And yet, you feel no sorrow in this place, only an ache, gentle and patient, like the soft pull of the tide against your ankles, an ache that whispers, some knowledge is meant to sleep, some truths choose silence over survival, because in the stillness of these buried halls, you understand what the scholars may have believed, that wisdom is not diminished by being hidden, that there is a kind of sacred dignity in allowing memory to rest, untouched by ambition or fear. A sanctuary is not always a place of access. Sometimes it is a place of retreat, where knowledge curls inward like a leaf closing at night, safe from hands unready to hold it. As you continue deeper, the river's presence becomes more pronounced. Drops fall from the ceiling like slow rhythmic tears. Tiny fish flicker in the narrow cracks between stones. Grass roots dangle from above, reaching downward like searching fingers. This place is alive, though not in the way a library once was. It hums with a different rhythm now. The heartbeat of the water, the pulse of earth shifting in its sleep. Finally, you reach a final alcove. Its walls are smoother, its shelves arranged with deliberate care. Here lie the scrolls that mattered most, sealed so tightly that many still remain intact. You kneel beside one, tracing the star mark etched into its lid. Beneath the silence, you sense the echo of a hymn, a faint resonance that has not been heard for hundreds of years. You lift the lid. Inside rests a single reed scroll, darker than the others, soft, yet strangely resilient. You unfurl it only halfway, revealing characters shaped like moonlight on water, like footsteps in sand. The words do not speak in any tongue you know, yet something in them feels familiar, as though they recall you rather than the other way around. For a moment, the chamber seems to breathe. The air shimmers, and the dust stirs with a slow swirling grace. It feels as though the library itself is awakening, or perhaps merely listening to your presence. But then the scroll too begins to crumble. Gently, delicately, as if offering itself back to the world. The reeds soften between your fingers, dissolving into fine grains that slip through your hands like a memory you can no longer grasp. You let it go. The dust falls onto the floor, and the river sighs in response. A faint ripple through the stones, a soft acknowledgement. Here, in this hidden sanctum, knowledge dissolves not in despair, but in release. Where memory fades, meaning may still remain. You leave the alcove and follow the narrow passageway until you emerge once more beside the river's slow current. Dawn has not yet arrived, but the sky carries a dim promise of morning. The reeds sway gently, brushing against each other like the pages of an unwritten story. You kneel at the water's edge. In your hand lies the last fragment of the scroll. A piece so thin it is almost translucent. You lower it into the river. It floats for a moment, catching the pale moonlight, then slowly dissolves into the rippling surface. Lines of ancient ink unravel, curling into dark tendrils before vanishing completely. The river accepts it without hesitation. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the library, the scholars, the scrolls. Perhaps all of it was crafted to sleep, not to speak. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as the final trace of ink disappears into the water, the river glows faintly. Just for a heartbeat, like a candle flickering in a forgotten temple. Then the light fades. Silence returns, and the library beneath the tides of time resumes its dreaming. It is said that in forgotten ages, when the river still carried the soft murmur of ancient prayers, a bridge once spanned its width. A bridge woven not of mortal stone, but of moonlight itself. By day, there was nothing but the flowing water, pale and unbroken, as though no crossing had ever existed. But on certain nights, when the moon hung low and full, and its silver reflection trembled across the surface, Stones appeared one by one, rising like memories recalled after long silence. Some Carl called it the dream bridge, others the path of returning, and some, in hushed voices, simply named it the way home. In forgotten corners of the earth, legends linger in the quiet spaces between truth and longing. This bridge is one such legend, a structure born not from chisel and hammer, but from yearning, from the gentle ache of things once lost. Whispers tell us that travelers who sought passage into the long-faded kingdom would wait beside the river on moon-marked nights, listening for the subtle shift in the current that signaled the bridge's return. Only then, beneath the silver glow, would the first stone shimmer into view, as though rising from the deep breath of the river itself. No one knows when the bridge was built. Some believe it was crafted by the same forgotten architects who raised the river's temples. Those who understood the hidden geometry of the stars and who built their sacred halls in alignment with celestial tides. Others imagine the bridge was never crafted at all, but emerged from the dreaming world, called forth by those who longed for passage into the kingdom that sleep itself could barely remember. And so our chapter begins, with a river, a moon, and a story whispered across centuries, with a feeling that the night holds a secret, just waiting to unfold, soft as drifting dust in a beam of silver light. The river, in the stillness of such nights, becomes a mirror, its waters smooth into a silk-like sheen, reflecting the moon in such clarity that the sky seems doubled. Beneath the silence, a faint echo stirs, the echo of stone meeting water, as though some unseen hand were placing the bridge's first step. The sound is gentle, almost hesitant. Then another stone appears, then another, each one glowing softly, marked by delicate star symbols that shimmer faintly like breath on chilled glass. Some travelers claimed that as they stepped onto the first stone, their reflections shifted. Not in any alarming way, but subtly. A tilt of the head that did not match, or a faint glimmer in the eyes that did not belong to waking life. It was believed the dream bridge did not merely carry the body across the river. It carried the soul through thresholds of memory, inviting travelers to walk not only forward, but inward. Perhaps that is why the bridge was always silent. No creaking, no groaning of weight, no splash of water displaced. Only the soft sound of one's own breath, mingled with the sigh of the river below. We walk across this ephemeral structure now in our imagining, guided by the soft rhythm of night. Each stone seems to hum with quiet intention, as though stirred by some ancient awareness. The river beneath us is deep and dark, yet touched with silver, its currents swirling in patterns reminiscent of spirals carved into old temple pillars. The far shore lies veiled in a drifting mist. Not ominous, but tender, like the edge of a dream just beginning to fade upon waking. Some stories tell of pilgrims who crossed the bridge seeking answers to unspoken questions. They carried no offerings, no scrolls, no tokens, only the quietness within their own hearts. For the bridge, it was said, responded not to the moon alone, but to the stillness of those who walked it. Those burdened with noise, with fear, distraction, or urgency, found the stones dimming beneath their feet, dissolving before they reached the first third of the way. Others, who walked with gentle intention, found the stones brightening as they stepped, as though welcoming them into some long-forgotten realm of memory. It is in these tales that we sense another truth, that the bridge was not a reward, but a reflection. The moonlight merely revealed what lay already within the traveler, a path shaped by the heart's unspoken longings. Some pilgrims claimed that halfway across, the river below would ripple with visions, reflections of faces long lost, moments once lived, or paths abandoned too soon. These visions were soft and wavering, like lantern light seen through fog. Some turned back at this point, overwhelmed by the weight of their own memories. Others pressed on, drawn by the gentle pull of the far shore. As we continue in imagination over the moonlit stones, the mist before us begins to shift. Shapes emerge. The faint outline of ruined gates, perhaps, or the broken remnants of a once grand archway. No two travelers describe the far shore in the same way. Some saw a forest of pale bark trees, swaying gently as though breathing. Others saw a lonely pillar etched with celestial symbols. Still others claimed to see nothing but silver haze, within which they felt a presence older than language. What lies beyond the bridge is not the kingdom itself, for that realm has long since faded into dust. Instead, it is a place where the echoes of that kingdom linger, a place where memory rests upon the land like dew, a place where breath and stone and moonlight mingle, forming the faintest outline of something once sacred. And as we approach this far shore, the one blurred by silver mist, the bridge begins to change. The stones beneath our feet grow softer in their glow, less solid, as though the dream is beginning to exhale. Footsteps that once echoed gently now fall into silence, swallowed by the night. The mist drifts inward, veiling the next stone before it fully forms. This is the moment described in countless legends. The dissolution of the dream bridge. It always happens just as the traveler reaches the final span. The stones, having served their purpose, begin to fade. Not quickly, not with panic, but with grace. Like breath fading on a mirror, or distant starlight softening just before dawn. The river below remains calm, utterly unbothered by the disappearance. The moon's reflection shivers, then steadies, as if acknowledging the passing of an ancient ritual. Some believe the bridge dissolves because it was never meant to be crossed completely. Others say that once the traveler understands what they came to understand, the path no longer needs to exist. Still others whisper that the bridge is a teacher, offering only as much passage as one is ready to receive. Perhaps all these things are true. Perhaps none are. Perhaps the river simply allows weary souls to dream their way into forgotten realms. Realms that need no physical crossing, only a willingness to listen to the space between ripples. And so the bridge fades. The stones dissolve into soft gleams of silver, drifting upward as though returning to the moon that birthed them. One by one, they vanish, until only the first stone remains. And then that too dims, leaving the river whole once more. The traveler stands on the shore they left, or on the one they reached. Legends differ. What remains constant is the feeling, a serene uncertainty, a sense of having gone somewhere without knowing where, a sense of having learned something without knowing what words could ever hold it. And in the river's soft murmur, beneath the silence, there lingers the faint echo of a path remembered only by dreams. Perhaps the bridge never existed at all. Or perhaps it exists still, waiting quietly in the moonlight, ready to return the moment a heart grows still enough to see it. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some paths return only in dreams.